Hello, I'm Neil Frood and I'm a clinical psychologist. This is the first of 3 sessions in which I'd like you to join me in exploring your own thoughts and feelings using a branch of psychology known as positive psychology. This is sometimes referred to as the science of optimism and happiness. In this first session, we'll focus on your happiness. You'll find out how happy you are, and you'll learn about the numerous benefits of being happy. And you'll also learn many practical and effective ways of increasing your levels of emotional well-being and happiness. In the second session, we'll be focusing particularly on positive thinking and how you can learn to be more optimistic in a realistic way. And then in the final session, we'll explore a number of effective ways in which you can reduce the distress associated with negative feelings such as anxiety and disappointment. The last session will help you to build a practical emotional first aid kit that you can use to calm yourself when you're feeling distressed and to lift your spirits if you're feeling down. So I really hope that you'll find these sessions useful and interesting. Let's start with happiness. If I asked you what you wanted from life, for yourself, your friends and your family, some of you would probably say, I want everyone to be happy. Others might say something like, I want to be successful. And if I asked, why do you want to be successful? Then you might well say, because that would make me happy. And in some cases, the chain might be considerably longer. I want to go to a good university, you might say. Why? Well, because then I'd get a good degree. And then I'd get a well-paid job. And then I could have a house in the country with a horse. And then I'd be happy. So for most people, happiness is the main goal in life, the main aim. And I don't just mean happiness for yourself, but also happiness for other people in your life. Let's now think about some of the big questions relating to happiness. Why are some people happier than others? Why are we happier at some times than at other times? What are the benefits of being happy? And can people increase their happiness level? And if so, how? Well, in this session, we'll consider all of these questions. We'll start by defining happiness and then asking a very important question. How happy are you? There are many definitions of happiness. Here's a good definition by a leading American positive psychologist, Sonia Lyubomirsky. She said, happiness is the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. So this definition identifies 2 important elements which have in fact been recognized as key aspects of happiness since the time of the early Greek philosophers. One element is essentially about feeling good, having positive emotions, and the other is a sense that your life has meaning and purpose. Okay. So now let's measure your happiness level. When it comes to feelings such as happiness, anxiety, anger, etc., psychologists distinguish between a relatively stable trait and a temporary and fluctuating state. Thus, someone who's generally relaxed and laid back would be low in terms of the trait of anxiety. But at certain times, of course, that person might well be in a highly anxious state. For example, if they're about to take their driving test or they're on a first date with someone they really like. It's the same with happiness. Some people are generally happier than other people, so that we think of them as high on the happiness trait. But like everyone else, they're bound to be happier at some times than at others, so their state of happiness will fluctuate. So here's a simple measure of your happiness trait.
I'll be showing you 10 simple statements. And for each of them, I want you to consider whether, in general, that statement does or doesn't apply to you. So start with this one. Life is good for me at the moment. Would you say that that's true for you overall or not true? If it's true, then you give yourself a tick. If it's not true, then it's a cross. And here's the second item. I'm good at learning new things. Apply to you or not? Is it a tick or a cross? Number 3, I have lots of friends. Apply or not? The fourth one, I'm quite proud of myself. True for you, or is it not true? This one, I have lots of fun. Overall, generally, would you say that that applies to you or that it doesn't? And so now what I'd like you to do is to add up the number of ticks that you have, and that will give you your positive score. It would be 0 if you had crosses for all of them. It would be 1 tick, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And now here are some further statements. I get lonely. You say that overall that statement is true for you or not true? I often get anxious. True or not true? I get bullied. True or not true? I'm easily depressed. That true or not true? Finally, I never feel safe. Is that true for you or not? And again, what I'd like you to do is to add up the ticks. But because those statements are all unhappiness statements, then this will give you, the number of ticks will give you the negative score. And finally, to get your overall happiness score, take your positive score and then subtract your negative score. The final score on this measure can range from -5 to +5, and most people will have scores somewhere in between these extremes. As we'll see in this session and in the other 2 sessions in the series, there are effective ways of increasing your happiness level. So your longer term happiness level is something that you can work on. Of course, it feels good to be happy, but a huge amount of research evidence has shown that happiness is also associated with a broad range of extra benefit. So we know from this research that generally happy people are more confident than unhappy people, that they're more energetic. We know that they're more productive and more creative, that they are more friendly and more helpful to other people. We know also that happy people are more optimistic and more sociable, that they are more popular and kinder to others. Happy people, the research shows, look forward to things more, that they are physically healthier, they're psychologically healthier, they are more able to deal with stressful situations, more resilient. Even we know that they live longer. Happy people live longer than unhappy people. Now, when it comes to research that's focused on the benefits associated specifically with happiness in young people, we find that this has shown that young people who are happy have better relationships with their peers and teachers, and they also achieve, on average, greater academic success. A leading researcher in this area, the American psychologist Robert Emmons, showed that the relationship between happiness and academic success is in fact a two-way relationship. He said, "Education helps young people to be happy, and happiness helps young people to gain more from education." So we have what we call a virtuous spiral. Things can get better and better. Education helps people to be happy. That happiness helps people to do better in education, which helps their happiness further, and so on and so on. Many other factors have also been shown to be linked to young people's happiness. We know, for example, that in general, happy young people don't have low self-esteem, that they don't suffer from extreme anxiety. We know that, on the whole, happy young people don't disengage from school, that they don't bully other children, they don't hurt themselves deliberately, and they don't starve themselves. On the other hand, we know that happy young people do get on well with other people, that they cope well under stress, so they are resilient, that they avoid impulsive, risky action, and that they look forward to the future. So the evidence indicates that there are widespread benefits to be gained from increasing and maintaining young people's happiness. Broadly, these benefits include positive effects on their social interactions and relationships, on their learning and achievement, and on their ability to cope with stressful situations. And in addition, there's a whole other dimension to the benefits of personal happiness, because happiness is contagious. Happiness is good for you, as we've shown, but also your happiness is good for other people. Your happiness is good for friends, family, teachers, other students, and in fact, everyone you meet. And it even goes beyond this, because studies have demonstrated a kind of knock-on effect, so that we know, for example, that increasing your own happiness will measurably increase the happiness of, at one degree, the friends you meet, but also at 2 degrees, your own happiness will increase the happiness of the family members of the friends you meet. And it goes even further than that, so that at 3 degrees, your happiness will increase the happiness of the neighbours of the family members of the friends you meet. So it follows that even if you're not bothered about being happy for your own sake, it's good to work on increasing your happiness for the sake of other people. But of course, there's a big question here. It's this: is it possible to increase your level of happiness?
This key question has been debated for over 2,000 years. Some philosophers and others have argued that it's pointless to try to be happy, and that any such efforts may actually backfire and make you more unhappy. Others, however, have maintained that there are things that you can do to increase and sustain your general happiness level. And over the past 20 years, there's been a good deal of research investigating precisely this question of whether you can increase your happiness. This research has mainly been undertaken by people within the field of positive psychology. And as a result of all the research, we now know the answer. And the answer is yes. Yes, there are things that you can do to increase your happiness level significantly and sustainably. But you can't do this just simply by making a direct effort to be happy. You have to use your intelligence, and particularly your emotional intelligence, to use strategies and techniques to increase your happiness. It requires substantial self-knowledge and the use of particular emotional management skills. These sessions will show you how you can develop such skills. But first, let's consider a key question that relates to this issue. Why do people differ in their levels of happiness? Why are some people happier than others? After we measured your happiness level a few moments ago, if we collected everyone's scores, we would certainly have seen a spread, some degree of variation. Some people might have had scores towards the extreme ends, whereas most people's scores were probably within a few points of either side of the midpoint. So some people would have come out as happier generally than others in terms of their trait happiness. But why do people differ? Just think about this for a little while. Do you have ideas about why some people are, overall, happier than others?
So what are your thoughts about these questions? Why do people differ in their general levels of happiness? Why are some people happier than others? Okay, well, as you would imagine, there's been a lot of research on the factors responsible for the variation, statistically speaking, the variance of happiness levels in the population. And this has shown that the differences between people's levels of happiness can be explained in terms of three groups of factors in the following ratio: 50, 40, 10, adding up to 100, or 100%. Now the 50 represents 50% of the variation in people's happiness levels, and this is due to genetic factors, heredity. So there is a strong genetic component that affects people's general level of happiness. 10% of the variance, a relatively small proportion, is due to people's circumstances, their accommodation, income, health, etc. And the remaining 40% is down to what people think and what they do. So if we want to enhance our happiness level, this is the area that is particularly good to focus on. So changing our thoughts and actions enhance and sustain our level of happiness. And we can learn how to do this. So that means that we can learn how to be happier. Going back just for a moment to the 10%, many people believe that their long-term happiness mostly reflects their circumstances, their income, career, health, and so on. And this means that often their efforts to achieve happiness will focus mainly on striving to improve these circumstances, to get a better job, to make more money, to look good, and so on. One version of this is what I call the raft theory. And this is the idea that a lot of people have, that lasting happiness comes from being rich, attractive, famous, and thin. However, there's no evidence to support this theory, And in fact, we know that many people who are ridiculously rich, amazingly attractive, fantastically famous, and extremely thin are actually very unhappy. The evidence shows that the best thing you can do to enhance and maintain your happiness level is not to focus on your circumstances, but to focus on the 40% factor: what you think and what you do. We can't control our feelings directly, but our feelings largely depend on what we're doing, what we're thinking, and what we're paying attention to. And we do have considerable control over what we do, and what we think, and what we pay attention to. So what can we do to make ourselves, and of course the people around us, happier? Well, positive psychologists and others provided a range of recipes for happiness. And I'm going to introduce 3 of these recipes. The first is a simple, traditional recipe that does reflect recent, relevant research. So this suggests that in order to be happy, you need 3 elements. First, something to do. You need to be occupied, be engaged with things, to be sufficiently busy. Secondly, you need something to love. You need some real enthusiasm, to be passionate about certain aspects of your life, and to have things that really inspire you. And finally, you need something to look forward to. It's good to have something you're looking forward to at the end of each day, for example, and then at the weekend, and also to have longer-term hopes and aspirations, experiences that you're really looking forward to. So based on this simple formula, the idea would be that in order to enhance your happiness, it's good to make sure that you have things to do, things you enjoy doing, and that you make an effort to develop and maintain a strong passion for some activities or causes, so that you work on building your enthusiasms, and that you also ensure that there are things coming up that you can look forward to. You might do this, for example, by making arrangements to meet people or by planning a trip. It's good to have exciting things on the horizon, positive experiences that you can anticipate and savour in advance. The second recipe for happiness comes from a project conducted a few years ago by an independent research group in London, the New Economics Foundation. This organisation was commissioned by the UK government to gather evidence on how people can enhance their well-being, and they were asked then to distill this knowledge into a handy formula. And as a result of their research, they came up with a simple recipe, which they labelled 5 Ways to Well-being. And this suggests that in order to be happy, it's good to do 5 things on a regular basis. First, give and volunteer. We know that being kind to someone is not only likely to make them happy, but is also likely to increase your own happiness. Secondly, keep learning. Be engaged. Work on projects. Engage in activities where you can see that you're making progress. Thirdly, take notice and live in the present. Spend more time paying attention to what's happening right now rather than living in the past or always just looking into the future. Fourthly, connect with others. This reflects the importance of being sociable and in investing in friendships and other relationships. And then finally, the 5th, be active. Do things. Take the initiative. And be active both physically and mentally. And the final happiness recipe that I'll introduce was created by Martin Seligman, one of the founders of positive psychology. In his book Flourish, published in 2011, he introduced the acronym PERMA. Now, P stands for positive emotion. Do things that you know will uplift you or delight you. The E is for engagement. Be involved. Your work, hobbies, your community. R is for relationships. Nurture the relationships you have and make new friends. M is for meaning. Know what your values are, what counts for you, what your life is about. A is for accomplishment. Have clear goals. Engage in efforts to achieve those goals, and when you achieve your goals, celebrate. Well, we'll use the PERMA model to think about ways of increasing your happiness level, and we'll focus particularly on the first element of PERMA, on P, positive emotion.
There are many different positive emotions, including joy, happiness, contentment, and pride. And all of these can be stimulated by things that happen to us, by things we do, and by things that we think about. So at this point, I'd like you to engage in a brief activity. I'll identify 4 positive emotions, one at a time. And for each one, I'll ask you to think of something that you could do or could think about in order to stimulate that positive feeling in yourself. We'll do this quite quickly now, but you might like to repeat this activity later in your own time to identify specific thoughts and actions that you can use to generate these positive feelings. So the first positive emotion that I'd like you to think about is amusement. Try to identify something. It could be a memory of something funny that once happened to you, for example, or it might be a joke or perhaps part of a film or a TV program, comedy, that you know is always guaranteed to make you laugh or chuckle. So try to identify such a trigger. Do that now. How did you do? Did you manage to think of something that would always be able to trigger a feeling of amusement for you? And if you did, I bet that even just thinking about it now was enough to make you smile. The next positive emotion that I'd like you to think about is pride. Try to remember something that you once did, perhaps something that you achieved, the memory of which can always make you feel good, to feel proud of yourself. Do this now. And the next positive feeling that I'd like you to think about is awe. Can you think of an experience that you had which was truly awesome for you, that really took your breath away? Think of that now. And finally, the feeling of joy. Can you bring to mind something that always makes you feel joyful, happy in that way? Perhaps this is memory of an activity, something that you did, a happy event in the past, a memory that always lifts your spirits. Well, that's the end of that activity, in which you've been really searching for emotional treasure. If you've been successful in identifying triggers that can reliably evoke each of these positive feelings, you'll now see how you can use this sort of activity to build on this and create a really valuable resource for enhancing your happiness. And this, of course, will be unique to you, reflecting your personal reactions, your positive memories, your particular sense of humour. Remember that, according to the PERMA model, experiencing positive emotions regularly will have a powerful and sustained effect of raising your general happiness level. The things that trigger positive experiences are sometimes referred to as uplifts. And even fairly minor uplifts can have a really significant impact. Sometimes even a slight uplift can really make your day. Of course, many uplifts just happen. For example, you might find something that you thought you'd lost, or you might hear a great joke, or you might meet somebody that you really like, or just the fact that the sun is shining may lift your mood. But as well as such spontaneous uplifts, you can also deliberately engage in activities that you know will, for you, be uplifting. So that means that you can make uplifts happen by organising your life so that positive feelings are triggered regularly and frequently. In other words, you can schedule uplifts to happen in your life. For example, you can arrange to go out with friends at the weekend, or you can go for a daily run, or you can meet a friend online perhaps once a week, or take your dog for a walk every evening. A key aspect of emotional intelligence is knowing what can act as an uplift for you. And the range of uplifts will of course be different for different people. Thus people differ in the degree to which they find music uplifting. And also they differ in the types of music that they find uplifting. People like different kinds of movies, different sports, different books, and different things to do with friends. It's such a valuable part of self-knowledge to be aware of the things that can give you an emotional uplift. What you find particularly interesting, what makes you laugh, what gives you a warm feeling, and what can bring you joy. Take advantage of the online resources that allow you to access practically unlimited media content that can stimulate the full range of positive emotions. Spotify, TikTok, Netflix, and so on, they offer infinite, almost infinite multimedia resources. You just need to know what stimuli will work for you. And it makes good sense to plan and engage in activities that will make you feel good. In these sessions, I'll be encouraging you to make such an effort, to work out what you can do to stimulate positive experiences, and then to use this knowledge to engage in activities that will boost your well-being so that you feel good, reap the extra benefits that come from being happy, and increase your resilience so that you'll be better able to cope if you're faced with tough situations in the future. I've already suggested that it's possible to increase your happiness levels significantly and sustainably by exercising certain skills, and that the relevant skills are part of what we now recognise as emotional intelligence. At this stage, I'd like to say a little more about emotional intelligence. As we know, some people are more clever than others when it comes to quickness of thought. This type of cleverness, of course, is linked to academic ability, and it's referred to as cognitive intelligence, and it's measured by the intelligence quotient, or IQ. There's also another very important type of intelligence, emotional intelligence, EQ. This is a person's ability to understand and manage both their own emotions and other people's emotions. Now, the two types of intelligence, IQ and EQ, are independent, so that some people with a high IQ have a low level of emotional intelligence, and some people with a very high EQ are relatively low in terms of their cognitive intelligence. Also, while it's difficult to significantly increase a person's IQ, it's relatively easy to increase emotional intelligence, to become more skilled at understanding and managing our own and other people's emotions. For example, we can learn ways of calming ourselves when we're feeling anxious. We can learn to soothe ourselves when we're feeling distressed. We can learn to keep control of our actions when we're feeling angry. And we can learn to lift our spirits when we're feeling down. Let's explore aspects of your emotional intelligence in two simple activities. One focusing on how well you understand your emotional reactions, and the other focusing on how you might manage a particular emotional reaction. Here's the first of these two thought experiments. Imagine that you've entered a writing competition. You've put a lot of effort into this, and you know that what you've written is very good. And when the results are announced, you learn that you didn't win the competition. In fact, a friend of yours won the competition. You came third. So how would you feel? Now, it's likely that your emotional reaction would be fairly complex. It would be a mixture of several different feelings. Can you identify three component feelings to your reaction to this writing competition scenario, the one that I've just described? So how did you do? If you found this task easy, that might suggest that you're pretty much in touch with your feelings, that you have good self-knowledge of your emotional reactions. Of course, we don't know whether your ideas about how you might feel in that situation really do reflect how you would actually feel if such an event were to happen. So there's no guarantee of accuracy. But if you found the activity difficult and had little idea of how you would feel in this situation, well, this would indicate that you're not highly aware of your emotional reactions, that you're not really in touch with your feelings. The second thought experiment focuses on another major aspect of EQ, emotional self-management skills. Suppose that you are about to face a rather daunting task, such as performing in a school play. And understandably, you're feeling pretty anxious. Can you think of some strategies that you could use that you know would help you to bring your anxiety level down? Think about that situation for just a little while and try to think of 2 or 3 things that you could do in that situation that you're fairly sure would help you to reduce your anxiety. Again, we can't know whether any ideas that you had during that activity really did identify strategies that would be effective for you in reducing your anxiety. But whereas some of you might have found that task really difficult to think of any anxiety-reducing strategy, others of you might have found it easy to come up with ideas. Perhaps based on strategies that you've used in the past to reduce your anxiety. Being able to identify particular strategies and feeling confident that they really would work to reduce your anxiety might well indicate a relatively high level of emotional intelligence, at least with respect to managing anxiety. So now we're coming towards the end of this first session. I've introduced positive psychology and explained several aspects of emotional well-being and happiness. I pointed to many additional benefits of being happy, including social benefits and benefits for both physical and mental health. We also learned that happiness is contagious, so your happiness also benefits other people. And we learned that it really is possible to increase your level of happiness, not only your fleeting state of happiness, but also your general trait of happiness. And I introduced several recipes that identify ways in which people can increase their happiness levels in the longer term. We discussed ways of increasing your happiness by changing what you do. And we considered in particular the importance of uplifts, experiences that stimulate positive emotions. And I suggested that rather than simply leaving uplifts to chance, it's good to organise your life to ensure a regular stream of scheduled uplifts. This can be achieved by understanding what triggers positive emotions for you, what excites you, interests you, amuses you, and makes you feel good. And then, as far as you can, arranging for these triggers to happen often. Understanding and managing uplifts is an important aspect of emotional intelligence. And this is something that you can develop and use in order to have a happy life, with all the benefits that this can bring for you and also for those around you. In the next session, I'll be discussing and demonstrating several other key aspects of emotional well-being, including attention focusing and a positive mindset. Uplifting emotions are very important for enhancing happiness, as we've seen, but so are your ways of thinking and how you see things, including the future, other people, and yourself. In the next session, I'll show you practical and effective ways of increasing your level of optimism and your positivity. And we'll discuss the importance of maintaining a growth mindset. And I'll show you ways of boosting your self-confidence and your self-esteem. Thank you for watching. Diolch yn fawr.